Okay, so look, welcome everyone. Today's PD session, Teacher Skills PD session, is on online audience engagement. And specifically, we are going to be looking at two platforms, Mentimeter and Padlet. And for a lot of people, you'll already be familiar with at least one of these. With Padlet, we have had it in place at the uni for a number of years. Both of these tools have the luxury, I guess, of being officially supported CSU products, which means we have licensing arrangements in place, enterprise licensing, which means that staff can use them to their heart's desire. They're supported by the Division of Information Technology and also by DLT, which means that when you have problems with them, etc., you can log jobs and get support of some description, either with the tool functioning or how the tool is used. So that's why we're focusing on these particular tools. You may have been in other sessions that we've run in the past as well, where we've looked at third-party tools that people are experimenting with, and we'll continue to do that. But these two today are official products that are supported. Mentometer in particular is interesting at the moment in that the university has a new enterprise license in place for the product, which means you can make as many Mentometer activities, presentations, etc., as you like, and share them with your students, embed them in your subjects, etc. And that is available to all staff through what we call single sign-on, SSO. So that means using your work login to get access to the platform. And I'll show you how all of that works today. Yes, Jen, that's exactly what that means. We get access to the full suite of Mentometer activities. All right, so look, today, what are we going to look at? Talk very briefly around the context for these tools and why our teachers might use them. We'll look, do a walkthrough at the Mentometer platform. I have cheat sheets around both of these tools, which I'll be sharing with you as we go throughout. I do put the workshop slides, PDF for those slides, into the chat pod, because inside the slides are also the links to those tools. So as long as you've got the slides to begin with, you can get hold of all of those cheat sheets, etc., even if you miss the rest of it, or don't look in DOMS, for example, where we store a lot of this stuff. As long as you've got the slides, you can get hold of those. All right, we're also going to have a look at the new integration of Mentometer in Zoom, which means you can launch your activities in your Zoom meetings. I'll show you how to do that. We have a look at a few exemplars of how the tools are being used, and time permitting, and it never is, we will get into Q&A, etc., and some teaching ideas about how these tools can be used. If not, have a look at the last two slides in your own time, and maybe you'll have something to add in that space. As with all of these workshops, please feel free to drop anything into the chat pod, come off mute, etc., pull me up, and we will deal with things as we can. But I am flying solo today, so I'm not ignoring you, I promise. I'm just probably getting back to it. Okay, so look, let's talk a little bit about online audience engagement. Essentially, we have these tools as a way to interact with our students, to get others involved in what we're doing. And sometimes they're referred to as energy boost tools. And let's just reject that. It's an opportunity for us to get input, ideas, opinions, and feedback from our audience. We have some that are built into the platforms that we use, like Zoom. So people using the chat pod, for example, or your reactions in Zoom, or maybe the polling tool. There are some tools that are built in. These ones tend to get a little bit more sophisticated, and that's why we're looking at them. There's an opportunity to make the participant, feel a bit more valued in that interaction, rather than just a passive arrangement as such. Channels for you to get your own needs identified. So when people send me private messages saying, Lachlan, can you please give a shout out to, my sick mother today? I mean, I can do that. And audience engagement tools make that possible. And obviously there's a differentiation there in your delivery approach from purely didactic teaching towards collaborative approaches. It also, some of these platforms give us the opportunity to create asynchronous interaction. So what we're getting at there is, if we have a tool or activity types that we can embed in our learning materials, and we can go away from, and they still remain live and active and allowing people to provide feedback, then that means we not only have a live engagement tool, we have an asynchronous engagement tool as well. And both of these platforms give that affordance. So again, why we're looking at them. And that means that we can do things in and around our live events. So you can get into your pre and post learning type scenarios and provide activities or get feedback before the actual live events. And we'll look at some examples of how that's done. Moving right along, Mentometer. What's it about? Mentometer is an online audience engagement tool that deals in this sort of language. It talks about slides, presentations, activities. Sometimes you'll hear the term voices used, which is really about individual student or participant votes as such when they get involved. So we'll see it talking about 15 voices. It's another way of saying 15 responses. So don't be put off by the language. It's just their own kind of jargon in and around that. All of it is hosted at mentometer.com. So if you're bored with what I'm saying and you want to look at this in the background whilst we're going along, cruise on across to mentometer.com and you'll be able to start seeing what we're talking about. I'm going to put the cheat sheet for Mentometer, our starting one, into the chat now for those of you interested. And Mentometer is a tool, is one that appeals to me particularly because of how intuitive it is. You can start accessing this platform from the get-go and building activities and having students interact with them in a matter of minutes. It is very, very easy to use. We are going to do a couple of those very quickly just to see how that mechanic works. But essentially, we need to provide a way for the audience to engage. So a link, for example, to a voting portal like the one I'm about to put into the chat pod. And that means that you all get to click on that. And then we get to have a look at the output as those results are harnessed. So I'm going to copy that and open it in a second. So our results or our output that we're sharing with the audience is talking about, in this case, the classic desert island scenario. What 3 things are you bringing? And the link that I have shared with you in the chat in our Zoom meeting allows you to vote as such. And those results will start coming through to our live page in real time. As we can see here, people are starting to put their responses in. Cheese, wine, and a book, couldn't agree more. And as they come in, they will see that this is in fact a word cloud type of activity with the most common responses. Alcohol seems to be quite popular in this case, being larger than the smaller responses. Bottom right-hand corner, we can see the number of votes or voices coming in, and you'll see that it's updating pretty quickly. So when we talk about something being relatively intuitive, it doesn't get much easier than this. Provide a way to vote. We have a look at the results coming in, and we've got a talking point which says, well, today's debate, is sunscreen more important than alcohol on a desert island, or is there some kind of symbiotic relationship between the two, etc. So we've had 13 people vote very quickly in this activity. Thank you. I'm going to kill it, and let's have a look at a different activity type. Just giving you a few exemplars of what this works like. Second activity, there's a link, an opportunity for you to vote in the Zoom chat pod. This time round, our output window, our results window looks like this. And now we have a ranking activity, which may take a little longer for people to engage with, but essentially it's going to ask you to order your own preferences in terms of setting up your own home office. We've got 8 choices, and people will use the voting portal to drag and drop their own priorities. And again, as those results are registered in the system, it will update live, and we can now see those coming in. Bar fridge. I'm sensing a theme here today, people. Okay. And we'll see these being adjusted as the votes come in. So we've got 11 votes in there already. All of the Mentometer activities are mobile friendly, which means you can engage with them on a mobile device just as easily, if not more so than we've been doing with a mouse. So this time around, that activity was pretty quick. And again, it gives us a talking point, an icebreaker, a way to collect information from the audience for us to go on with. Maybe we can do it again at the end of our session and see if people's opinions and positions have changed, etc., etc. So I can see that we've got 20 votes in a matter of less than a minute. So again, I'm going to kill this activity. Thank you for all of your feedback. I can see that Wi-Fi seems to be the winner in this case. Third activity. Again, I'm grabbing the link, share it with the audience. And I will also grab the output link so that we can have a look at the results together. This will be the last Menti activity that we do. And this time round, we have an activity that's asking people to choose 3 choices in this case. Who do you rate out of these glorious lady singers here? And I would hope that Aretha Franklin stays on top for the duration, but we'll just see. This looks about right. Britney Spears, stay right there. Okay, so you can see we've got 3 different activity types. It presents the information in different ways. It's visually engaging. It's easy for people to get involved. This one allows us not only to have text choices, but there's also image stimulus going on as well. And it's almost like a race, essentially, as it puts it in that kind of bar graph or worm type format, which is allowing clear winners, etc., to be identified. 22 votes in a matter of kind of under a minute. So something about this design has got to be working. So all we've needed for that to happen really was a voting link and a results window for us to have a look at. So this is for us to get a little bit familiar with the context of Mentometer. Now we're going to have a look at the back end. How did we do this? So I'm going to go across to mentometer.com. Now, what I would like to point out, and this comes down to the new enterprise license, which is covered in the Mentometer cheat sheet, which again, I'll drop into the chat, is that when you sign into Mentometer, if you're not already signed in, you'll see a login or sign in button in the top corner. There is a link or a button there that says sign in with SSO, right? Single sign on, and that will ask for your work login at Charles Sturt Uni, and it will just create an account for you on the spot. That's all you need is your work login and to click sign in with SSO. I think what I'm going to do is actually sign out here myself and show you what that looks like so that you can see. I'll log out. Okay, so we've got login and sign up. I've already signed up before, but the process is the same. If you hit the button down here at the bottom, login with SSO, there it is. You don't have to fill out any of this other stuff. Login with SSO. Organization name, Charles Sturt Uni. Thank you. Authenticate. It will now open the uni's login portal and ask for your work credentials. I've already signed in today, so it's just passing me straight through to the tool. So it's very, very quick. I'm going to go through the process quickly of creating one activity in Mentometer to show you how that works. I click on New Presentation, give it a name. Remembering that language, that jargon we were talking about before, we talk about presentations with slides. On those slides, we have activities. So that's what we're dealing with here. I've got one slide in my presentation so far. I'm going to make an activity. Let's have a look at the word cloud that we made earlier on. I'm going to choose word cloud as my activity type. At the moment, it's showing me the live activity and it is already created. We're now just editing. What question or text do I want? Okay. What's my favorite food? Something very, very generic. How many entries can people make? Okay, in this case, I can make 3. Do I want an image in the background? I can do that. Do you want your voters to be able to submit multiple times? No, not particularly in this case. That activity, as I said, is already live, but how do we get it out to our audience? So we want to be familiar with these 3 different menus at the top here. The type menu allows us to switch between activity types. Content is what goes into them. Customize allows us to decide how they operate. So all Mentometer activities remain live with people able to engage with them unless you close them, right? So they don't need to be launched and opened. They are open. Until you go in here and actually close the voting, they will remain open. This instructions bar is talking about this instruction at the top here with a number. We didn't use that when we voted. I gave you a link and you engaged. This is for your live in-person type scenario when you've got someone in a lecture theatre and everyone's got their mobile phones, because they can go to Mentometer and put in this code. Go to menti.com, put in this code, and then you can vote. So this is a face-to-face scenario in this case, whereas we've been dealing with providing people with links, and I'm going to show you how to do it in Zoom in a second, so you don't even need those. So I'm going to hide these instructions, and you'll see they've disappeared from the top of the activity. All right, these are more kind of advanced customization layout type features. You can have a play around with those if you like, but really that's all I'm interested in at this stage. I have a word cloud ready to go. How do I get it out to the audience? At this stage, we can look above at these buttons that we have, particularly the share button. If we click on this, we have 3 tabs to look at. It starts with the participant area in the middle, and it says, how do we provide this link to people? It's like, do we want to give them a QR code? Do we want to give them a link? Let me just get rid of that person. Okay, so in this case, I've copied hyperlinks and I've given them to you in the chat pod, for example, as I've done again now, and that will allow you to go in and vote. That's the voting link. How do we see what the activity looks like as people vote on it? That comes down to how the presentation is shared. That's our next tab. And this is our output or our results. So again, I've got a separate link for the output, and I can see in the background, people have already started voting, for example, on this. That's what I mean. It's live straight away. And if I want to have a look at that output window in a website, there it is. And those results are coming through already. So it was very, very quick for us to create the activity. But our other option with Mentometer is that we can embed the activity, the output window, directly in a website like an I2 site. I can click on getting the embed code, and that could now be put into an Interact 2 page, and our activity would be embedded so that you can actually leave the link for people to vote, leave the output for the activity, and you've got an asynchronous activity at that point. It's that easy. I would like to point out in the participation tab, there's also mention of that voting code, that number for when you're with a live face-to-face audience. That does not stay the same or persistent indefinitely. It needs to update every 2 days. So if you're delivering like this, you can't just copy that number and keep using it again a week later, a month later. You'll need to come into the back end and get the new number. We have a question, Tori.
Yeah, so Lachlan, I'm just a little bit confused. So we were on a PowerPoint presentation that you were giving us just before, and are you, how are you, so you've got Mentimeter open separately to your PowerPoint?
Yep.
Is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
And then how did you show us the results like within the PowerPoint?
Okay.
I think I missed that step, sorry.
No, that's not a problem at all. It's a good question. So this is my slide deck that I'm presenting. In the slide deck for each activity, I've got 2 links that have been that I've put into the deck. One is for voting, one is for the results. I've made those activities previously in the back of Mentometer where we were in here. So I've just made a new activity, and this is where I got those 2 links. By clicking on the share button up here, under participation, I get my link for voting. That's the first link that was in the slide deck. And secondly, the link to look at the results together, that's under presentation. See the live results. So that's where I get those 2 from. And I've just happened to put those in a slide deck today just to help. Does that make sense? Okay, great. All right. And we also saw that we're able to get to embed those results. I would like to point out that now we have the enterprise license for Mentometer going, we also have the opportunity to use a new feature, invite collaborators. And that means that if people have signed into Mentometer here under their staff account, they will be on this list. It means that you can share your Mentometer activities with a group of people and they will all have access to the same pool of activities. So this is a question that we've been asked probably over the last year or so in terms of this tool. We don't just want one person to have access to the activity. There's a risk there if that person goes, or it needs to be shared amongst a group of people. This collaborator feature means that I can invite another Mentometer user to also have access to the activity, a series of users, a team of users. So we've got a teaching team that all want to use the same sorts of Mentometer activities in their different presentations. It's now possible to do that under this tool. And I can do that just by putting in their CSU address. So I could turn around and say, okay, I want to share it with Rebecca Atchison and send an invite link. And that's it. That person then has access to my Mentometer activities and edit them as well. So it's not just me and my presentations in here. So if we have a look, for example, under my presentations at the top here, we'll see that that's a very long list. But it's not just me with access to them now. I've just invited a collaborator to share with that activity that I just made, which is this test for PD1. Right, so what I would like to point out, I'm going to stop for some questions in a second, but the other option that we have, we've got one activity at the moment that we would share a link to. We can add additional slides with additional activities on them. And that means that you can run subsequent activities. So you do the first one and then we progress, and then the audience can do a second activity and a third activity, all part of the same slide deck as such. Personally, when I've used Mentometer in the past, my main way of using it has been to create individual activities that I have shared. It's just easier for me to get my head around, to be honest. But you are able to make multiple activities in a row. Or if you've got, for example, a full presentation in here with content slides with activities in the middle of it, you can also do that now. Participants do not have to have a CSU email, Jen. No, they don't. They just need a link, that voting portal link, and then they can engage with the activity. It's a good question. All right, I'll stop there for a second. Has anyone got any comments or questions before I keep going? The next thing that I'm going to be talking about is how we use Mentometer in Zoom. That's my next area.
Quick question, if I may.
Mm-hmm.
When we share the link with the students, if we've created more than one slide, does that link show the students all the slides, or is it just the first one? Is that linked to the first slide or to all the slides?
That's a really good question. It basically will have, to start with, they'll get the first slide, because you as the presenter have control over which slide you're up to. So if you've got multiple activities, multiple slides, until you progress the activity, they are, by default, they'll have to wait for you to move to the next slide before they can use the next activity. So it's like PowerPoint, for example. They're not looking at that next slide until you move that deck along.
Okay.
But we're moving the slide from our PowerPoint, or we're moving the slide from Mentimeter?
You'll be moving it from Mentometer.
Okay.
Absolutely. Yep.
Okay.
So we'll have to have a play around with that, how that works. It's a little bit more complex. You can also import PowerPoint slide decks into Mentometer so that your slides will all appear down here along the left, and then you can create these activities, different activity types to drop in to your slide deck. But we're talking a bit more work at this point rather than just creating an activity on the fly and sharing the link. So as I said, there's more to this that you'll need to spend some time getting used to. Catherine, I've got a question here. You can add lecture PowerPoints and add activities into the PowerPoint. Absolutely. You can do that using the import button. I haven't had a chance to play around too much with it, but it's absolutely possible with the enterprise license. And I'd encourage you to have a go doing that. Let me know how you go. The other thing I need to show you is that if you've got an activity that you want to reuse and you want it cleared, you'll need to go into the back end of Mentometer, into your activity, and you'll see on the first screen, do you want to download the results, which will give you an Excel with the results, but it's anonymous. No, there's no names or data collected, just the output. And we can also click on reset results, either this slide or all the slides in here. and then those voices are gone. Yeah, that's right, Emily. You couldn't use this for assessment. It doesn't collect user data in terms of who they are. Yeah. All right.
Sorry, Lachlan, can it also capture it as how it appeared with the word cloud?
Sure
or is
does.
it only the Excel? I can, okay.
Yeah, it'll give you a PDF or an Excel, your choice.
Oh, okay. Yeah, cool.
Yeah, the PDF will give you an image of what the word cloud looked like.
Yeah, thanks.
It's a really good question. Okay, so yeah, the only way you would be getting names of participants was if you asked them to identify themselves in their response somehow. Okay, I want to get into using this tool in Zoom. So I'll put the cheat sheet again for Mentometer into the chat for those of you who have been asking for it. But there are many different activity types that you have inside Mentometer, and I can't cover them all in this session, for example. So I really would encourage you to have a play and have a look at the difference between those basic question types, multiple choice, word clouds, open response, speech bubbles, using scales or the ranking activity that we did before, and creating those. And there are some advanced types as well, which allow you to use images and other things in your activities as well. So I would definitely encourage you to have a play. But what I want to show you now is how we get Mentometer working inside our live Zoom meetings. So I have a Mentometer account and I have a live Zoom meeting. Those are the two things that I need for this to work. All of this information that I'm about to talk to you about with the Zoom app for Mentometer, the detail for that is in the PDF that I've just put into the chat for you. Again, this is all in the slide deck. And what it relies on is our Zoom meeting. So I'm going to share my Zoom meeting interface. There are all you lovely people in the room. I am sharing my screen, am I not? Okay, great. Thank you for all the nodding heads. All right. So down the bottom of your Zoom interface, you'll see a button that says apps. Okay, this is a relatively new feature. This links to the Zoom marketplace. And when it opens, it'll show which apps you have installed for your Zoom. For me, I have Mentometer installed. You may not. If you don't, when I run an activity in a second, you're going to be prompted to install the Mentometer app. You can also search for it yourself along with any other marketplace app using this Discover button. At that point, you can search for them. Underneath, you can discover more apps, etc. under there. I will point out that the process of getting an app approved for use on a CSU Zoom account has to go through a governance committee. So you might request that one be added, and then you might have to wait, 2-3 weeks, for example, for the governance committee to review it. Mentometer has been approved, so it will just install for you. Right, so I'm now going to choose Mentometer. And you'll see that my chat pod and my participant pod has disappeared when I use this tool. If you're lucky enough to have several screens, I can actually click my chat, and what I'm going to do is actually pop it out and move that onto another window so I can still see what people are saying. Now I can go back to my apps button. We'll see that Mentometer has asked me the first time I've used it, what do I want to do? Do I want to present or do I want to vote? I'm going to present. And here's our login screen that's asking me for details. Again, we have an enterprise license, which means we can click on SSO, single sign-on, and I'm going to log in. It's asking for a verification code. Okay, so in this case, Charles Sturt Uni. This only happens the first time that you use this. I'm going to authenticate, Charles Sturt University. It's looking for my login details. And it's now given me that code that I'm asking for. Okay, copying it to my clipboard. If I go back to my Zoom meeting, here's that code, and I can paste that in and log in. So it has now accessed all of my Mentometer presentations in my Zoom room, at which point I can open a folder, locate the files that I'm looking for, such as that home office activity, for example. It's now loaded a preview of it for me to see over here on the right. That's what it looks like. You guys can't see it in the room yet, apart from our share screen. And then it tells me the order of things I need to do to get this to work. Invite who I want to use it, and then share the activity. So I'm going to click on that invite button. Who do I want to be invited? Everyone in the room, all participants. Invite. And now all of you in your chat pod inside your Zoom room should have received a notification asking you to join a Mentometer activity. For me, it's saying the next step is to share that activity so that we're looking at that output or the results window. So I can click on that. And now in our room, we have our output window. And hopefully you have access to the voting portal for Mentometer for you to engage with this activity at the same time. So at this point, I'd encourage you to either come off mute or put in the chat pod how this is affecting you. I can see that this is updating. So some people have got access to the activity at least. Is it working for everyone?
So where should we see the voting?
The invite for you to vote in this should be above your chat pod in Zoom. So Nicole's saying not for her, Jen's saying not for her. Supposed to enable us to click on view. All right, I'm going to do it again.
I got the view button. It's trying to open.
It's trying
it just came into the chat. There was a message into the chat saying Lachlan Kalache is inviting you to a Zoom app.
Right. And then you'll need to click on that button for view to engage with that.
It's come up and it said Mentometer add.
Yeah, so I think the thing is because we're first time users. So it's basically asking you at this point to add the app. Once you actually have Mentometer installed inside Zoom, then you bypass all of this. It just allows you to engage with the activity. But this first time,
everybody who's participating in the Zoom has to have Mentometer loaded.
Yeah, or follow that process of clicking on add under apps, for example, to add Mentometer. So I can see that some people it's working for, and arguably they've used Mentometer in Zoom before. That's why it's following through, or they've had to follow that install process. This is the fiddly part. Yeah, you've got to be logged in to Zoom. It should allow even guest accounts, I wonder. So we've got some people that have come in as guests, I'm guessing, into our meeting. For your students, thank you, Dawn. So Dawn, did you come into Zoom as a guest user, or did you log in as yourself when you came into Zoom? Right, you've used your single sign-on to come in. Okay, thank you. Yeah, all right. So this is good to know. So the app works for those that have logged in. So our students, for example, in our subject sites, if you're going through your I2 site and they're using the Zoom LTI tool, that means they're logged into Zoom. They're not coming in as guests. When academics provide a link to a Zoom meeting through an announcement, for example, then the students will often click on that link and they won't necessarily be signed into our systems. That's the difference between using the tool that's in the subject site and getting them to join that way, or coming in through an external link. Yeah, so we might need to work on this. I can see a number of people have continued to vote in the activity. So it looks like we're having some success, but not universal. All right. So we'll have to keep plugging away at getting the Menti app to work. It obviously requires you to be logged in and also to have it installed. I will point out.
Just what is the difference between putting it into Zoom or just sharing a link like you did previously?
Okay, so
advantage. I mean, for the students, would not it be better that I just share a link and they vote, or do I have to do this?
Absolutely, absolutely. I think, Asim, to be honest, you got to work with what you're most comfortable with. I like the integration with Zoom, but if it's not working for everybody on the spot and we're having kind of this sort of thing, then I would be getting the two links like that. I'd probably continue to do that if I was continuing to experience problems.
Yeah, I think maybe because I don't want the students to be stuck in like in a technical situation, asking question, oh, I can't do it, I can't do it.
Absolutely. No, I completely understand the situation. Hence why, for me, sometimes I do use both. Yeah. All right. So look, so we've had some questions about getting back to the app. Keep in mind that what I'm sharing at the moment, when we share the output window, it's the same as sharing a screen, but this is just a very particular screen, the output. So I'm going to stop sharing, which will bring us back to our Zoom meeting. And for me, if I share my screen again so you can see what I'm saying, you'll see that the Mentometer quick launch, the app window is still there on the right-hand side. So part of the hiccup with using the Zoom integration with this is the fact that it goes over the top of your chat and your participant window, unless you've popped those out and moved them somewhere else. So for me, I've got them sitting on another screen, for example. But you've got to have the real estate to be able to do that, for enough monitor space, etc., to be moving parts of your Zoom meeting around. All right, so look, that's our first kind of crash course in using the Mentometer in Zoom app. For some people, as we've pointed out, it might be simpler to continue to use the Mentometer backend, which is, whoops, what we were doing back here, and building activities, using the share button and collecting a voting link and a results link and sharing it that way. So, you know, I absolutely agree. You've got to use what works for you when it doesn't inhibit your teaching as such. But do persevere a little, have a go with getting the Mentometer in Zoom app to work. When it does work and everyone's got it installed, it's nice and quick and smooth. But if you're having hiccups like that, you do have a workaround.
Sorry, Lachlan. So what you're doing with this, with sharing the link, you then just share your screen, you open it because it opens up in another web browser tab. Is that what you're doing? You just
that's
flick
what
in?
I've been doing. Yeah.
Yep. Okay. Yep.
I do find it easier myself, as I did with on the slide deck, to actually have them pre-prepared so that all I need to do is grab them from the same spot. And that means I can keep moving through my other content as well at the same time. Yeah, okay. That's one way of getting organized. Can you just
click on that then, and just so we can see again what happens? Sorry, everyone, but I just trying to get my head around this.
That's fine. So the voting portal link that I'm giving to participants, in this case, because I'm in Google Slides, I've just grabbed the link. I drop that into the chat. And then people get to vote on the activity, but they can't see what their vote is doing until you give them the output or the results window link. That's the second one. Okay, and that in Mentometer itself in the back end, that's the difference between participating or voting, that link, and the output, the live result. That's where you get those two pieces of information. Yeah.
And question, do we need to share the presentation sharing link, or can we just sort of click on it and it sort of it shows on our screen, and while people are voting, I think it'll look nicer that way, you know, people seeing it change, like what you've done now.
Yeah, look, absolutely. You can't launch them from here, from Mentometer, from the back end, but once you've copied and pasted those links into your presentations, yeah, you can absolutely click on them and launch them from here. Yeah.
Lachlan, can I just ask, would that also work like with PowerPoint slides? You're in Google Slides. Does it work with PowerPoint?
It sure does. In fact, with PowerPoint, for example, all you've got is control click and it'll launch the window by itself. Yep. It's faster. With Google Slides, for example, because I use it kind of in this build mode as well. It means when I click on a link, it asks me what I want to do with it. That's why I'm kind of getting it like that. But PowerPoint's much quicker in that it'll allow you to launch the link on the spot. Yep. All right, I'm going to keep going because I'm aware that time is getting away and we haven't looked at the second aspect of today's presentation, which is Padlet. Again, all of the documents and things, plus the recording for today, etc., will be available to you afterwards. When we were using that marketplace app, apart from signing in with single sign-on, the process that we were working through was asking you to find your presentation, invite your participants to use that, and then to share. Those are the three options that you have to work through when you're using the Zoom integration in Mentometer. Sorry, the Mentometer integration in Zoom, I should say. All right. very quickly, I'd like to show you a few exemplars of how people have been using both Mentometer activities embedded in their content areas and Padlet, the second part of today, which we are going to breeze through as well. So look, I'll launch a bunch of these. I'll close these other links and then we'll go from there. All right, so there's 1, 2. I'll come back to these. Sorry, I'm just going to. So what I've got here that I'm about to show you are 3 Mentometer activities that have been created and then embedded inside learning material content in a subject site. So the first one is here. This is a Mentometer activity that has been embedded in the subject site. This time it's an open response activity that allows students to click on the link. That is the voting portal link that has been put into the content. And this is the output, the results window embedded in the content. So the students can keep engaging with this, and we'll see 154 have done so down the bottom. And this Mentometer activity just sits there and keeps going until someone clears the results or deletes the content. And there are others inside this same area. This time round, it's asking students about text types and what they're comfortable with, sentences, paragraphs, introductions, conclusions, etc. This is a different Mentometer activity type that uses a Likert scale, for example. Again, the students click on the voting link and then their results are updated in the output window. Okay, so again, Mentometer activities can easily be embedded and left alone to just keep running. Next example we have, it's probably exactly what I was looking at a second ago. Yes, it is. Okay, so there are more of those. They have multiple of those sliding scale activities embedded in the subject site. Third one. Really? Am I in the same area still? Okay. Probably should have looked at these again. They do have a number of them. What other types do they have? We're at a word cloud, thank God. All right, so here we have a word cloud activity with 97 votes that's asked, well, I guess it's asking what's academic literacy. I would suggest you've got to think a little bit about your instruction for an activity to make sure that people understand what they do with it. So in this case, where are the instructions? Can't see any, right? But I'm guessing, what do you understand by the term academic literacy, or what words do you associate with academic literacy? And you click on the voting portal link up here to put in your response. So again, you do need to think a little bit about the language that's used with your activities. Have we got any more in here? Nope, I think we're all out. Okay. So those are 3 examples of Mentometer activities that have been embedded within content area. Let's have a look at 3 Padlet activities. Show you a couple. Okay, Padlet, as opposed to Mentometer, is what we call a bulletin board software. It allows you to make posts and additions to a common area, a common wall, and those posts and the format for that being presented take different formats. So we'll have a look at Padlet. I know a lot of people in here are very familiar with Padlet. This type of Padlet wall is called a timeline. So it allows you to make posts along a continuum. And in this case, it's allowing students to see welcomes from, this is in a course site. So for each of the units, their instructors have each pre-recorded video that have gone into the post. So the students get a breakdown or a welcome to each of those subjects. So this has just got YouTube, in this case, clips embedded for each of the instructors, coordinators for each of those subject sites. Right, so that's a Padlet wall with those clips embedded. There is potentially some text underneath. Yep, subject welcome presented by Linda, for example, in that case. And then they have each of those video clips embedded. Other types of Padlet walls. This is probably the most common use of Padlet that I've seen here, is people providing an introductions wall for students where they can add their own post and meet their peers, so to speak. And we'll find that all that requires for people to add to the wall is to click on the plus, which then allows them to put in a subject, potentially add some other types of files, whether it's images or links or other content, and then write a blurb underneath, and the post will be added to the wall. That is a very common use case for Padlet here. And there are usually some guidelines in and around this as well, telling people not to share kind of personal images and pictures, etc., as this is visible to everyone else in the subject site. Next one, we have, if we scroll down, we will find that the academic has used Padlet to create a wall of shame in this case, where they are adding industry-based examples of things going on in the media. So they've found links and they have, this is called the shelf format that allows you to have columns of posts underneath, one underneath the other. So the students get given an example of, in this case, talking about solicitors' conduct rules being broken. So the academic provides a stimulus and then the students respond underneath. So that's, you'll see that with Padlet posts, it's allowing you to add different types of media, video, text, image, etc. And your audience gets to respond to those on that wall. Padlet, as I mentioned before, is supported by an enterprise license called a backpack license, and that is accessible to staff. I'm going to provide the cheat sheet for Padlet in just a second for you. All you need to do is send an email to Padlet@CSU and you'll get an account provisioned if you don't already have one. But the actual Padlet account all sits at this address, charlessturt.uni1.padlet.org. And once you've actually got an account provisioned to you by DIT, you will be able to log in to the Padlet backend and create as many Padlets as you like. Essentially, I've got a couple of hundred in there, so that's why it's taking so long for mine to load. But the process for making a Padlet is very, very easy. We click on Make a Padlet. We choose the format that we would like our Padlet to be. So in this case, for example, I'm just going to make a wall. That page is already live, but now I configure it. So I'm going to give it a title up here. The description is the subtext, the line underneath the title. So usually I provide some form of instruction in here. And Padlet revolves around hitting a plus button. So that's probably what I'd be telling people to do. Click the plus. Then you can customize it, put in icons, change the wallpaper. If you don't like that garish pencil business, you can upload your own images and backgrounds as well, if you don't like the ones that they've got in there. Okay, so in this case, I have this lovely Christmassy background. Okay, in this case, all I want for Christmas. And then you can further customize how you want people to engage with your Padlet. What would you like? Do you want people to be able to comment on other people's posts? Sure, why not? Do you want people to be able to react to other people's posts? So this requires some consideration as this takes a number of forms. So do you want them to be able to upvote and downvote other people's posts? Do you just want them to be able to like something? So that whole, if you can't say something nice, you don't get to say anything at all. Do you want people to rate them using a star system, 1 to 5 stars, or even allocate a grade as such, or none at all? Most of the time, I just use the like option. It seems the safest. And in this case, there also allows for us to turn on a profanity filter. If you're worried about people putting nasty things in their posts, you can also turn on a profanity filter underneath. This is all that's required initially to customize your wall. As I said, the wall's already live. So I'm going to click through in this process as it now tells us that we're able to start posting. All right, so my wall is live and people can click on the plus to add posts to my wall. So I'm going to do one of those. What else can you add to a Padlet post? The 4 default ones allow you to add a file, add an image or a photo, add a link, or to do a search for an image. But really the full range of them is accessed by hitting these 3 dots. At that point, we see the full range of options for what you can put into a Padlet post. And some of these are quite powerful. You can do a screencast, so that'll capture what's on your screen and record your voice at the same time. You can just capture audio if you wanted people to provide an audio recording. You can turn on the video recorder, which basically will grab your webcam and your microphone and start making those kind of updates quickly to your Padlet wall. You can, again, provide links to websites, etc., images. You can even link to things like YouTube clips, etc. So in this case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to drop a link in just to show you what happens. I'll just put a link to the Herald in this case. Now I've dropped that link into my post and it creates a thumbnail to the website automatically. And I can still put in my commentary underneath. Right, so I can actually do that. You can also change the color of your text if you so desire. But once you hit the publish button, the post is there on the wall, ready for everyone to look at, to comment on, to like or dislike, for example, and people can all keep adding to the same space. So Padlet then, the question is, how do you want this to be accessible to students? Do you want to have to give them a link to go to a wall? Or again, would you like to embed it within your learning materials? And that's the way that most people use Padlet here. To do that, you need to go up into the top right corner, which is a bit hard to see because of this wallpaper. Let me just change the wallpaper so that you can see what I'm talking about. Give me a dark color, that might be better. Okay, up here we've got a share button. That's what I wanted to show you. Underneath share, this is where we can add other people who have control over how the Padlet operates. So if I wanted, for example, Emily in here, I start typing her in, there she is, Emily Marsh. I'm now going to give her permission. What do I want her to be able to do to my Padlet wall? Well, I'm going to get her to also be able to edit the Padlet wall and how it operates. And I can save that. So you can add collaborators to your walls. But what I'm interested in here is how the students engage with these walls. By default, students are able to write on them to make posts. That's on by default when you create your walls. If you want to change this so that, for example, you might provide updates to students, but you don't want them to be able to make posts themselves, then you have to change the privacy settings underneath. And so that you switch it so that visitors can read. At that point, all they can do is read your updates, but not make posts themselves. But writing on the walls is enabled themselves by default. Okay, the last bit that I want to show you in here is that idea of embedding your Padlet walls within your subject site, which means you need the embed code. And that's down here underneath. When we click on embed in your blog or your website, the first bit of information over here on the right is the code that you paste into your I2 site, for example. So I can copy that, go into an I2 site. I'm sure I can get hold of one. I'll make one in here and then delete it before the academic kills me. If I go in with instructor mode, edit mode on, I can build a new item. And in here in the content, this is a normal view, but I want to actually work in code. So I have to go across to this code button, turn on the code, Control V to paste in that embed code that I just got from Padlet. And my wall is now embedded and ready to be used. If I hit submit, this will now be right down the bottom in my subject site. Go right down the bottom. Keep going. There's the Padlet wall. So I have an embedded asynchronous activity now available to the students who get to come in, click on plus and add their own post to the Padlet wall. So again, very quick and easy to use. but Padlet is an asynchronous tool rather than probably more of a live tool like Mentometer is. All right, so I know we've whizzed through using the Padlet tool. I'm just going to delete this before I forget. But it is very quick and easy to create Padlet walls and then to make them available to your audience. If, for example, you just wanted to give people a link to go to a Padlet wall, you can always grab that from up the top from your browser bar, at which point you can share it with your audience. So for example, if you're in a Zoom session and you want people updating a Padlet, you could have one ready-made and just share the link to it for the audience to then make their own post to go to. All right, jumping back to our slides, and I am going to stop for questions in a second. We've been looking at Padlet. We've been looking at how easy it is to create the walls in Padlet, choose those different formats, and then to share those links or to embed the walls. You may have your own ideas already in place for how you're going to use Padlet, or if you've got examples on how you are using it already, I'd love to hear about them. Some of the ideas that we have in here for either Mentometer or for Padlet is the idea that you can switch between using it as a live delivery tool or an asynchronous tool for students to use at their own time. It does give you opportunities to create icebreakers very quickly and easily. Or to do brainstorming, etc., collect people's opinions or feedback. Maybe you want to revisit them, for example, to see if that position has changed, and a range of other processes. But look, I want to stop there and give you the opportunity with the time that's remaining to either share your own questions or examples on how you might use either of these audience engagement tools. And in the meantime, I'm going to start sharing some of the files, etc., that I've been referring to today for you to grab for those that didn't. So, who wants to go first?
Lachlan, I've got a question, of course.
Please.
With Padlets, I know in the past we've had issues with, people setting up fantastic Padlets and then no one being able to access them when they either become ill or go on leave or they leave the university altogether. So do we have like a default person or a custodian that we should add when we create Padlets so they can access them? Is there any process around that?
There is,
and even with Mentometer as well?
Mentometer, there isn't an official process outlined as such for you. So it's a really good question. I think when you build these things, if you've got a teaching team and and you're adding collaborators as part of that process is a really good idea. It makes a lot of sense. No, there isn't an official process.
It's like a generic account, even if we could create like a ghost DLT representative or someone who would have access.
Well, we're lucky enough to have a couple of people from DIT in today's presentation, so we might take that on board and have a think about it. But I can tell you from experience that the term generic account is basically hated by most people from DIT.
Okay.
any kind of IT department don't like provisioning generic accounts as such, as they can get shared and abused as such. But I think starting with having several individuals with access, I will point out that Padlet, the solution is very, very simple. If you've got a Padlet wall and the person who owned it has gone, it's very easy for you to get use of that same wall again. And that's by remaking it. You'll always be able to click on the remake button. And at that point, it will create the same wall, but under your account. So as long as I can see the Padlet wall, I can then re-provision the same wall. Maybe you don't want the posts that are on there. But yeah, you can re-provision it very quickly and it then makes the same wall under your account.
Okay, so that gets around that. Thank you. I didn't know that. Thank you.
Absolutely. Anyone else? Questions, comments? I'm going to turn the recording off in a second as well, right now, in fact.